Our particular concern is around women who experience multiple disadvantage, substance use, homelessness, most of whom will have experienced domestic abuse as well. Something like 60% of women who use mental health services have domestic abuse at some point in their history. And our concern is that for those women, it's absolutely essential that those services are gender informed and gender sensitive. We did a report which I can send through to the committee a couple of years ago, along with the Agenda Alliance, called Mapping the Maze, which actually looked at how much service provision there was in those areas that was gender specific. Out of 173 local areas in England and Wales, only 19 had women-specific support that could address substance use, criminal justice, mental ill health and homelessness. And we know that, for example, with things like substance use, group work, mixed group work just doesn't work. Women who've experienced domestic abuse won't go. If they do go, they leave. Male behaviour in this group to be very predatory. There's plenty of evidence around this. So this would be our concern. It's about not just looking at domestic abuse services, because we know for this group of women, quite often domestic abuse isn't the presenting issue. It's what underlies their problem, it's why they drink, it's why they're depressed, but it's not what they present with. And you actually need to have services across the board that can actually get under that. We believe it's essential that the bill recognises that children don't just witness it, they experience domestic abuse and are affected by it. I think the wording of the bill still doesn't recognise them as direct victims. We have a particular concern about having solutions that deal with the effect of domestic abuse on children that, where possible, fall short of permanent child removal. Because when we talk to women who've experienced domestic abuse, but who've also had their children removed, the child removal is the thing that makes it most difficult for them to recover. Now, that you might say, well, that's fine if the children are going to a safe home, but most of these children end up in care. They're not young children quite often. They're quite children whose behaviour can be problematic because of what they've experienced, and they go from a home where, with the right support, temporary removal, support for parenting like we see in countries like Germany and Scandinavia, those families could have stayed together, and that would have been in the child's interest and the mother's interest as well. Linked to that is a need for much more opportunity for early intervention via universal services, so that women can go for help in the community without having to identify as a victim of domestic abuse, particularly in small towns where everyone knows everybody. You know, it gets really complicated. But also we need to see proper step-down arrangements when statutory safeguarding ends, because we know that at the end of statutory safeguarding quite often the mother's left kind of trying to cope, the child's left unsupported, everyone thinks it's okay because the box has been ticked. So we would like to see both the bill and the supporting material, as well as looking at all the issues that the children's sector have raised and that we support around children in the bill, also looking at some of those areas. So we look at the mother and the child and how you can actually support both of them long term to have a proper recovery and a proper future. We believe that the remit of the Domestic Abuse Bill and the Domestic Abuse Commissioner should be violence against women and girls, because you can't untangle a DA completely from other forms of violence against women and girls. For example, 45% of rapes happen in marriage or an intimate relationship. So no, we don't want another bill. We would like to have a really good, solid Walker bill in the first place. Like many people, we're members of the Step Up Migrant Women campaign. We support that. But I would say that before I worked in this sector, I worked in the refugee sector. And I would say that, first of all, the resolutions don't just apply within the bill. The hostile environment and the public statements that go around it, they're like a gift to perpetrators. Because I've met women who have settled status in this country, they have a right to be here, but their perpetrators say to them, you don't have the right to be here, and if you report me for beating you up, you'll be deported. She doesn't know that, she doesn't have her passport, she doesn't have her papers. And I think we need to understand that women are more likely to believe it when they're told that, if that's what they're seeing every time they turn on television, if that's what they're seeing in their streets. So I think it does go beyond the legislation. But in terms of legislation, we would support all the things that have been said around women being victims first and migrants second, and having firewalls and all of those things. And I do hope that later on the committee will take some direct evidence from those groups working with migrant women, because they have some incredibly powerful stories.